Right, so I'm going to be looking at the questions for Officer Davis here. So I think they're pretty neat, so let's see if we can cover these. Alright, training, pre-contact, observations, and impeachment. So it didn't quite do the lay the foundation here when it comes to the beginning. We ask, were you trained to be a law enforcement officer? Are you aware that you cannot arrest someone for failure to identify without reasonable suspicion or probable cause of crime? Are you aware of the requirements in the performance of your duties? You must explain to a detained person immediately why they have been detained under Code of Criminal Procedure 218.1. See, there's no lay the foundation here. It's and it wasn't necessary. And to lay the foundation means to ask them their full name, and if they're cops, and I don't know, what city are we in. It's very simple. It only needs to be like a couple of questions. Are you aware of the requirements in the performance of your duties? You must. Okay. Did you attend a state-authorized police academy? Which academy did you attend? Were you trained to write police reports, or what do you call them? Were you trained to write reports that were accurate? Were you trained to write reports that were complete? And the reason for truthful, accurate, complete reports is because other people would depend on your report, right? The prosecutor would depend on it. The judge and jury could depend on it. The defendant would depend on it. And in this case, you wrote a report on January 22nd. You just testified as important to a lot of people. You made that report truthful, accurate, and complete, correct? Were you taught to write your report as a narrative in chronological order? And that's how events happen, right? And you wrote the events listed in your January 22nd report in chronological order. So you can see that we're trying to get him committed to his report. Did you get trained to be a trained observer? I don't even quite understand the trained observer question. It's interesting. Can you explain what a trained observer means? And they really didn't satisfy my interest in that. In your training, were you taught about evidence? You learned to collect and preserve evidence. You learned that evidence was important in proving in court that somebody committed a crime. You learned that sometimes you need to take action to preserve evidence. Is it your belief that a person has to identify themselves to you upon your request, no matter what the circumstances are? Gosh, I can't remember how the cops answered that question. Are you aware of the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution? Did you learn about the Fourth Amendment in the police academy? After attending the academy, did you swear an oath to the United States Constitution? You learned that there's a Fourth Amendment grants protections to citizens, right? Okay, and now this starts going into territory where I was getting objected to because I was accused of it being more lawsuit territory. Principles. Have you heard of principle in law enforcement that you have to have all the elements of a crime to charge that specific crime? Based on your training, do you believe that different crimes have different elements? Okay, so this I think at this point the question got objected to by Prosecutor Benjamin, and then this line of questioning was being disrupted quite a bit. You were trained that you should arrest a person only after you thought they met the elements Well, now that question is pretty good. Can you use an arrest for one crime to justify adding a charge of another crime for which elements are not met? So I think that was objected to. It's like a speculation thing that Prosecutor Benjamin brought up. And you can't change your police report to claim arrest for a different crime when the elements of that different crime are not met. Would you agree with that? What are the requirements to your understanding or belief to exercise your authority to detain a person? Alright, so I was having difficulty. I did ask this question. Have you ever heard of a Terry stop? Were you trained to conduct a Terry stop? You have to be able to articulate the crime. Did you learn what a consensual contact is? Would you agree that a consensual contact is when you are contacting someone and they can choose to speak with you or choose not to? Would you agree that the difference between a Terry stop and a consensual contact is if you have already developed reasonable suspicion, it's a Terry stop, and if you have not yet developed reasonable suspicion, it's a consensual contact? Let's see, we're questioning about knowledge from other sources, things other people told them. On January 22nd, 12:30, you responded to a dispatch call about a suspicious male at the library. Is that library open to the general public for anyone to use to your knowledge? So it's a public place. I'm handing the report you wrote on January 22nd, the same day that Mr. Hines was arrested, right? Is that your January 22nd report? Alright. They had no problem with that. Your Honor, I request to submit the report as evidence. And so, yeah, he confirms that it's his report and all that. And so then, upon that confirmation, I asked to have it submitted as evidence, and you had to give prosecutor opportunity to object to it. Before you arrived at the library that day, you had some information about the reported person, Mr. Hines, right? You got that from the dispatcher, right? You had some information. He was a white male, 6 feet tall, right? You got that from the dispatcher. You had some information. He was suspicious, like he was casing the library, right? You got that from the dispatcher, right? You had some information that he was checking the doors to see which ones are locked and which ones are not, right? Okay, you got that from the dispatcher. You had information that the white male... Now this was a racial thing. When I said white male, Prosecutor Benjamin spoke up about the white male issue. You got that green army jacket info from the dispatcher, right? A white male in a green army jacket. Okay, and then we got that clear for the description. That's all the dispatcher told you, correct? Do you know, yes or no, if all that information came from the complainant, Rosalind Parker? Did you answer the phone? Okay. How did you know the dispatch told you correctly what Parker said? Okay, so do you have any recollection of the level of suspicion you had as you arrived at the library? Okay, I want you to focus on that level of suspicion, okay, because as you investigate, suspicion can increase or it can decrease, right? You still have that January 22nd police report in front of you, right? Okay. Please follow along with me. At the phrase, upon arrival, you arrived at the library and talked with Miss Parker, right? Miss Parker told you the man was wearing a green-colored jacket. You see that in your report? It's not exactly a green army jacket like the dispatcher said, right? Green-colored jacket versus green army jacket. Did your suspicion go up, down, or stay the same? Now this is where I got objected to. The prosecutor said that there's no way to accurately gauge the level of suspicion going up, down, or staying the same. So that made a lot of these questions very difficult because the judge agreed that it was like comparing to your gas meter in your car, and I think that was a faulty logic. Did the acting weird statement make your suspicion level go up, down, or stay the same? Okay, so these up, down, and stay the same are pretty good questions, but man, did they get cut off by city judges, I think. And then, yeah, this is where I stumbled through because of the up, down, and stay the same. Everything you wrote in order like you were trained to do. And I want you to look at the paragraph. Parker stated that staff spoke. And to the end of the paragraph, Your Honor, I'd like to hand the witness the same report with that paragraph highlighted so we can keep track of it. So you fabricated that whole highlighted part of your January 22nd police report, didn't you? I'm going to impeach the witness with Officer Davis. And then I got objected to, I believe. Your Honor, may the clerk play that now, the video part of that from the start up to when the officer gets to the magazine section. And then we played the video. And I think, please look at it carefully in your report and find a moment in your written chronology when you turned on your body cam. Let's see, answer doesn't matter, but get an answer. Okay, let's cover each of those points anyway. The statement that Mr. Hines tried to go up to the 3rd floor but it was locked. Then he went to the magazine section. You see those in your report? Does that statement make your level of suspicion go up, down, or stay the same? And so the judge ruled in favor of prosecution about the suspicion levels. So I was just kind of saying, did that give you suspicion? Then it says Hines started unloading his backpacks. Does this statement increase your level of and I was just saying, does this give you suspicion? Does it give you probable cause? The statement, and I guess that's what objections do, is they make you stumble, and without having experienced that before. The statement was that Mr. Hines started unloading his backpacks while trying to conceal things. Isn't that right? It's clear as stated in your report that Miss Parker told you she saw Hines unloading his backpacks while trying to conceal things, and after that she called the police, right? Does this statement give you probable cause? Does this statement about concealing things contribute to the totality of the circumstances that gave you authority to detain Hines? And I forget his answers exactly. I more remember the objections. When did the contact with the defendant, did you decide that you had the authority to arrest the defendant? Do you claim that it was right when he didn't give you his name the first time you asked? Did Mr. Hines ever refuse to give his name? Were you able to investigate what had occurred at the library without knowing the identity of the defendant? What investigative questions did you ask? Did use your memory and your January 22nd report as needed. What exactly did you develop reasonable suspicion to detain Hines? Officer Davis, please look at your January 22nd report at the bottom and see, quote, Officer Miller then recalled a probable cause for officers making contact with him, end quote. You wrote that, right? When you made contact, you had already decided you had probable cause to arrest. Show me exactly in your chronological report where you developed probable cause to arrest. I find that interesting in the report because you got him locked in at the chronological questioning, and then since it's chronological in the report, then they have to show at what points the probable cause developed. Wasn't it after you had asked the defendant 3 or 4 times for identification? Was Mr. Hines contacted or detained? Did you review security video of Mr. Hines in the library prior to making contact with him? When you made contact with the defendant in the library, had you already decided that you were going to arrest the defendant? What were the exigent circumstances that you needed to know his identification immediately? When you made contact with Mr. Hines, did he fit the description you were given? Did you ever conduct a show-up identification of Mr. Hines? Did you ever conduct a lineup identification? Did you review security video of the individual at the library prior to making contact with him? Upon making contact with the individual, what crime had you determined that the individual had committed? Was the individual in the commission of a crime at the time you made contact? Did you charge that individual with any crime other than failure to ID? What facts did you have to support your suspicion that the individual was going to commit a crime? When you made contact with the individual, did you identify who you were and that you were a police officer? Did you tell the individual that he was detained prior to asking him his name? Did you tell the individual that he was under arrest prior to asking him his name? Is it your belief that a person has to identify to you upon your request, no matter what the circumstances are? You saw a discrepancy between what is reported and what you observed, correct? When you saw that he was not wearing a green army jacket, did your perception of the level of suspicion go up, down, up, or stay the same? And see, once again, this isn't the line of questioning that was objected to, so I was stumbling through that. Having seen a discrepancy, were you alerted to be cautious in assessing each of your other pieces of knowledge that the dispatcher told you? Did you determine to investigate the reported statement, quote, suspicious like he's casing the library, unquote? Were you determined to find out if that was true? What did you do to investigate that point? Throughout the entirety of your pre-arrest contact with Mr. Hines, did your level of suspicion, how many judges rule that asking about levels of suspicion changing is not a good line of questioning? I don't know. Throughout the entirety of your pre-arrest contact with Mr. Hines, did your level of suspicion, checking the doors to see which ones are locked, go up, down, stay the same? So it's more of this up, down, stay the same, repeat the exercise. But even though it's not an official police report, this is reviewed by supervisors, still followed your training to be truthful, accurate, and complete in your narrative, correct? Take all the time you need. Do you testify under oath today that everything in this statement is truthful? Alright, so Your Honor, I'm sorry, but now I need to go sentence by sentence. Okay, and that's... I'm not sure. Okay, so I wanted to get him to commit to saying no. If he says truthful, then I kind of dig into that. Everything in that statement is truthful, and it's not quite. Were you trained to uphold just some of the laws or all of the laws? I want to show Officer Davis 218.1, and then I pulled out the law and showed it to him. This is a lot of questions. So asking after as you just testified, you detained Mr. Hines. What words did you say as Hines was, quote, advised fully of the reason, unquote? See that? What did you advise? You didn't, quote, advise fully the reason, unquote, because you follow the law, and Mr. Hines wasn't detained, right? So he was detained under 14108, the resisting or obstruction, but not detained under 218.1. I'm confused. You can't have it both ways, can you? Your Honor, I want to show Officer Davis the statute 14106, and I ask that the court take judicial notice. Take your time. Is this the obscenity law you have in mind that you claim Mr. Hines violated? And if you claim that Mr. Hines displayed pornography is true, who was the victim? I would like to draw your attention to section capital D as in dog number 1. Did you see that? On the second line, do you see public libraries? I'm going to read to you, and I want you to tell me if this is right. The provisions of this section do not apply to recognized and established public libraries. Okay. Stuff about porn. You didn't seize the computer as evidence, did you? In fact, you took it to the station and searched it, didn't you, without a warrant? You played the audio of the voice recorder of Mr. Hines. And this is where the prosecutor was objecting about the voice recorder, because it's like after the fact. They're arguing about stuff that occurred after the fact, and they didn't want to allow that into evidence. So I move on to the next question. After making the arrest, did you perform any investigation into the events that occurred? And I think after saying after the arrest, I think Cloyd jumped in and objected to anything that's after the arrest. They only wanted to talk about what happened at the arrest. You were angry at Mr. Hines as you put him handcuffed in your car, right? And that's after the arrest. During that period, you displayed disgust and contempt for Mr. Hines, right? Okay. I'll stop here. Okay. Stop recording.